see you all around TV, radio, YouTube, in that universe, right? And I extended the invitation to you when you was on Robert Patillo's show this past Sunday, and you said something about, the gender wars that you have a tendency of hearing when it comes to content creators putting out content about, the modern women, black men, and stuff like that. For those that did not get a chance to check out Robert Patillo's show that you was on this past Sunday on WAOK, do you mind expounding on your message that you conveyed to our WAOK listeners that Sunday about the gender wars that you have a tendency to observe?
Yes. In my observation, this conflict and this aggressive confrontational conversation that has taken place over social media between black men and black women has reached toxic levels. I think it is anti-productive at this point, but because it is such an entertaining subject that everyone wants to hear about and many people are affected by, unfortunately, the discourse is not at the point where it's ready to turn the corner and be more solutions oriented. At present, the gender war is more accusatory. There is no attempt to find a common ground between black men and black women. And this ties right into your subtopic of mental health. Myself being a psychologist, I would say that the quote unquote content creators who are covering this gender war controversy are doing a disservice to the black community because they are adding to that negative energy that so many black men and black women are accustomed to dealing with and are currently confronting in the relationship they're in or the relationship they just absolved. So I think that content creators need to be a little bit more responsible to the community with the energy that they give off and the direction of their conversation. Too often the conversations end without any solution or any positive talking points, which in many respects would lift social media content creators to the level of gangster rappers when it comes to offering a lot of toxicity and very little positivity in the black community.
And I can attest to that. And I was saying the same thing, Dr. Umar, that whenever I watch content, especially black content creators on YouTube and online, and they put out content, but they always talk about the problem. They talk about the problem. We know that the problem exists, but what about the solutions? Let's switch over to Danny Parks on the line. Danny Parks, what do you have to say to that commentary from Dr. Umar Johnson? Do you feel the same way when you come across content creators in that particular universe, especially black content creators?
Yes, what I've noticed, and I definitely agree with Dr. Umar, we're always presenting the problem, but not the solutions. And I believe that that's what they're wanting, just for us to focus on the problems. That's their content, and they really don't have solutions, because to have a solution, that means you have overcome, whatever you're talking about. I do believe that most of us talk from our feelings when it comes to gender, what we've experienced in relationships, whether it's a romantic relationship, friendship, or even a business relationship. And we're only presenting the problems. We don't have the skills yet. A lot of people don't have the skills to have those crucial conversations. So you leave a relationship with just the problem. And a lot of people don't sit in that very long in order to come up with solutions to see, what they did wrong in a relationship, what the other person did wrong in a relationship, and then come to a mutual agreement on how to fix it, how to, move on without having all that animosity. And that's what you see on social media, a lot of hurt people, wanting other hurt people to agree with them.
Hurt people. Pan-Africanist psychologist Dr. Umar Johnson. Hurt people, right? And in the world of content and creation, people have more access than ever before. People have platforms that they probably would not be able to get on 10, 15, 20 years ago. So just like what Danny said, do you think it comes from a place of hurt? These Black content creators that talk down or talk about their own perspective of the plight of Black America, do you think it comes from a place of hurt?
Particularly with regard to the discourse on male-female relationships in the Black community, without question, it often comes from a place of hurt. From a purely marketing perspective, if I know there are emotionally wounded Black women out there who simply want to hear someone validate their pain and verify their pain and castigate the alleged person responsible for that pain, then the content creator is going to cater to that voice. And it's the same thing with the men. If I was hurt by my wife, hurt by my fiance, hurt by my child's mother, hurt by my girlfriend, I'm looking for someone to validate and verify my pain. And I'm expecting them to also denigrate the person I claim to be responsible for it. And the problem with that analysis is, from a relationship therapy perspective, both parties are responsible for the failure of that relationship. There's never a 100% innocent person and a 100% guilty person in any failed relationship. It doesn't work like that. Both of you had a role to play in the demise of that relationship. But when your ego is scarred, when your ego is bruised, when your ego is hurt, you're not interested in taking responsibility. The ego isn't humble enough to take accountability for the role that it plays. And that's the danger of these content creators, because they play to that one-sided victimization narrative that everybody wants to be parroted, because nobody's interested in taking accountability for their role in the problem at hand. The other item as well with all of this is social media does two things that are dangerous for the Black community. Number one, they give you an uncensored platform for the most part. As long as you obey the community guidelines, your channel will not be taken down. So they give you an uncensored platform, and then they pay you for the amount of views that you get. So you are looking at two of the biggest evils in America and two of the biggest evils in Black America, and that is attention and income. Social media gives you both. Social media satisfies the ego, because people are watching you, they're listening to you, you feel special, you feel important. Keep in mind, a lot of these individuals who are content creators today, they were social outcasts in college, social outcasts in high school. Social media has given them a new life, and their ego is loving it. And they are willing to do anything, including distort the truth or create fires where there are none, in order to remain relevant. So that's the attention side of the equation. And then you have the income side.
Dr. Umar, let's hang tight. Hold on to that thought. Let's put a bookmark in that, because what you're saying, it sounds really good. We got we got our other panelists in the studio that are shaking their heads, and we're going to give them an opportunity to ask you some questions. Dr. Umar, as well as Danny Parks. We got G Wade and DJ Miss Eclectic in the studio. 404-726-1380 is the mental space with Sean Garvey. Welcome back to the mental space. Sean Garvey, News and Talk 1380 WAOK, and on the Odyssey app, search for News and Talk 1380 WAOK. I am Sean Garvey, still in the studio with DJ Miss Eclectic, G Wade of the G Wade podcast, and also joining with us on the live line is life coach and mental health advocate Danny Parks, and the one and only Pan-Africanist and psychologist Dr. Umar Johnson on the telephone lines, 404-726-1380. If you like to speak to our panelists as we continue to talk about content creators social media influencers and mental health. Before the break, Dr. Umar Johnson, you were saying some good stuff. We all were shaking our heads in the studio, but we want to continue allowing you to have the space to finish what you were saying before we went to break.
Yes, real quickly, I was saying that social media affords Black people two things that a lot of us don't get enough of, and that is attention and income. And when you apply those two together, when you give someone the opportunity to have their ego validated in a public space and at the same time pay them for the amount of people who pay attention to them, you're creating a monster. And that's why you see a lot of content creators, they go live all the time, all day long. Social media addiction is a real phenomenon. And I would not be surprised when the next issue of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders is released by the American Psychiatric Association, and we'll probably get a new one in the next 2 or 3 years. I would not be surprised to see social media addiction as an included disability category. The last point I want to make is in reference to journalism and content creation. The reason a content creator is not a journalist is journalism is held to a standard of expectation. When you print something in the newspaper or an online journal and you are a trained journalist, you're going to be held to some of the information published in your article being factually true. You're going to be held to finding resources to substantiate your claims, to substantiate your arguments. Content creators are not held to the same level as journalists. That's why it's called content creation, because the assumption there is that some of the information is in fact fabricated, if not all the information being in fact fabricated. And to me, it's a disservice, because when I go back to the first newspaper created in this country by Pan-Africanists, John Brown Russwurm and Samuel Cornish, Freedom's Journal out of New York, it was to educate and it was to advocate. It was not to denigrate, marginalize, or expand the negative energy that exists in the community. I definitely think the Black community needs to move toward some standards of principle and some points of solidarity that all content creators are expected to adhere to.
404-726-1380. I'm going to allow DJ Miss Eclectic and G Wade of the G Wade podcast to ask you guys some questions, or just to follow up on what both you, Dr. Umar Johnson, and Danny Parks mentioned before we went into our last break. So, G Wade, DJ Miss Eclectic.
Oh, sure. First of all, it's an honor to be on the line with you, Dr. Umar Johnson and Danny. Hey, my girl. Absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely agree with what both of you said. It's coming from hurt. But I'm also going to think from a viewer standpoint, are we looking at social media the wrong way? It's entertainment is what it really is, but are we using it are we looking at it as we're going to therapy? Are we using it for psychological advancement? How are we using social media as viewers? When they say they're, like you said, they're content creators, they are not licensed, they are not credentialed. It's not like when I go to therapy and I sit on somebody's couch and I get actual therapy from that relationship where I had an ego, or for where I didn't want to take responsibility for my actions and I leave healed. When you're watching something on social media, for me, you're watching it as purely entertainment. So should we put on that entertainment lens, or are we actually watching it to actually thinking that we're going to get healed by self-proclaimed people who are on social media?
You raise a good point there, Queen. And just quickly to respond, I would agree with you, except for the fact people are significantly influenced by social media. The polls show it. The research shows it. In fact, if people approach social media purely from an entertainment standpoint, I think the community would be better off. The truth of the matter is social media masquerades as reality, and in that lies the threat.
Absolutely. I think it's a crossfire, right? We don't know what we get crossed. We like, well, I think it's entertainment, but he said it. He was confident about it. So I know he's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on DJ Miss Eclectic, you said therapist, right? And that's what it seems like nowadays, where content creators, and I've already mentioned the names earlier in the broadcast of who some of there are that G Wade said earlier that we're polarizing, people that we are accustomed to hearing and that we're knowing. But the average person look at them as almost like therapists, they're licensed therapists, and they're not really trained or licensed to be therapists to give out what they feel like is advice or valid information, but really it's just their own opinion. And like Dr. Umar Johnson said earlier, it comes from a place of hurt, comes from a place from experience. So, G. Wade?
Well, I have a question, Dr. Umar. This is G. Wade from G. Wade Podcast. Certainly honor meeting you, and hello to Miss Danny Parks.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. So do you think who's at fault here? Is it the media outlets for paying the social content creators for, just spewing whatever their in a sense, unsolicited facts, untruths? Is it the social media outlets at fault for paying for the ego, for the dopamine hits?
I operate from the premise that you can never blame a capitalist for practicing capitalism. It's the same argument when people say, who's responsible for gangster rap? The European music industry or the actual gangster rapper? How can you blame the industry? Because that's a capitalist practicing capitalism. At the end of the day, the Black community has to take responsibility and accountability for the ills in our community. And what bothers me the most about social media content creators is the fact that right now, Black America is existing in one of our worst eras in this country since we got here. The way we are being treated, the murders by the police, the third-class citizenship that we're being subjected to, is you would have to go back to the 1960s to find a parallel for the treatment of Black people in America today. And with everyone having a platform of their own that they can utilize at any time and project information into the world, it's disturbing when I go through YouTube or Twitter or TikTok or Instagram, and I don't see conversations about the kidnapping of Black women. I don't see conversations about the mass incarceration of Black males. I don't see conversations about the food deserts, which a lot of our Black communities have become, or the hospital deserts that a lot of our Black communities have become. There is no law for the amount of critical stories that could be taking place on social media, but rather than grapple with the issues that are really affecting us as a race in this country, content creators are focusing on gossip, celebrity news, sports, slander, gender wars. Everything but the important things have become the topics of choice on social media.
Oh, what a great segue, Dr. Umar Johnson, because when we come back from the break, we only got about 30 minutes, close to 30 minutes until the end of the mental space. I want to hang you guys over, both you, Dr. Umar and Danny, for the bottom of the hour, because I'm going to play a clip from a podcaster, or a YouTuber. I believe he's both. But it comes from the Woke Nation podcast, and he mentioned something about just kind of like what Dr. Umar Johnson just said. It's other things that we need to be focusing on other than the modern women and Black men this and relationships. That's all I hear from Black content creators. So I'm going to play that clip before going back into the conversation at 404-726-1380. And Todd, I see you. Plus, we're going to get some commentary from our AP herself, Michelle, and let her weigh in on the conversation. You still got time to call in at 404-726-1380. We have DJ Miss Eclectic, G. Wade, Danny Parks, and Dr. Umar Johnson. We're talking about this important conversation on mental health, social media influencers, content creators, and mental health, the mental space with Sean Garvey. So our EP executive producer Simone had to sit this one out on tonight's show. She is on vacay, and usually around this time we do Simone's Choice. She randomly picks a song, most songs that I never even heard of, from artists that I don't know who they are. But I know who this artist is. John Boy on the Track, featuring Nigel Perkins. Sit this one out. So tonight is Sean's choice, not Simone's choice. Sit this one out by John Boy on the Track, featuring Nigel Perkins. Sit this one out. 404-726-1380 is the telephone number. Why do we keep having these conversations offline? Because we're saying some stuff good that needs to be on the air. DJ Mr. Collected, G Wade, along with life coach and mental health advocate Danny Parks, as well as psychiatrist and also Pan-Africanist Dr. Umar Johnson on the live line as we talk about content creators, mental health, and social media influencers. So my AP, who's going to get on the mic in just a few moments, we want to make sure that we cue this clip up. It's from, no, don't play that yet. Don't play that yet. We're going to play it from that file right there. The one at the top there. So this one, not that one, that one. Okay. So don't play it yet. Don't play it yet. You're so anxious, Michelle. All right. So we're going to play this clip from the, it's an excerpt, I should say, from the WAOK Nation podcast by this guy, who is of color, African American. And he gives his assessment on Black content creators and other things that we need to be talking about other than relationships, modern day men and modern day women. So I'm going to let you hear it, and then we're going to take everybody's comments. Go for it.
So where who's going to be hiring you, since these low end jobs, these McDonald's type jobs, Taco Bell's, cashiers at Walmart, greeters, and all this stuff? This is what I don't hear people discuss in these Black spaces. This is what I'm talking about. This is exactly what I'm talking about. It's just more talks about the manosphere and the men's and the women's and against this. And, I one day the bus driver and the young Miami is talking about, I don't know what they be talking about, but just all this focus on this stuff. It's not a problem, but there needs to be some type of a balance. We need to discuss the fact that automation will take a lot of your jobs away in the future. We should talk about these things more, and we're not doing it.
Oh, we don't talk about these things. We don't talk about automation taking over jobs one day. We always talk about men and women relationships, the problems in relationship these days, and the manosphere. The manosphere, a new term that I am just now discovering since last year. The manosphere. Dr. Umar Johnson, let's say you, the manosphere. Who do you know who created the manosphere?
I don't know who created it, but it appears to have grown out of a reaction to the radical Black feminist narrative that was overtaking the YouTubian space as it relates to the disintegration of Black male-female relationships and who should be blamed as most responsible for that downfall. And of course, from the radical Black feminist perspective, it's the Black man. All problems point to him. And so Black men being too emotional rather than dealing with the situation from a perspective of logic and masculinity, they descended into emotional name calling and emotional rants. And so now you have two sides here. You have the radical Black feminists on one side, and then you have the manosphere on the other side. And it's simply just trying to prove who can be the most disgusting when it comes to embarrassing the opposite gender in a public space. Black people are the only people who will go into public, and by public, I'm speaking of social media, and tear down their counterparts. Like to see Black women tear down Black men in public space, and to see Black men tear down Black women in public space, it's very disheartening, and it's very dangerous. Why? Because our children are living at a time where the global white power structure is pushing childhood transgenderism as a strategy for genocide. And so for Black boys and Black girls to be watching not celebrities, but everyday Black men and women go at each other's throats like that, a lot of them will be influenced to consider living their life as the opposite gender, because it doesn't appear that Black men and Black women can get along. I think this whole back and forth gender war between the feminists and the manosphere is going to negatively impact on the next generation of Black children as it relates to them making a decision of being a part of a healthy, heterosexual, traditional Black family, or whether they want to go ahead and join the transgender army. It's a very dangerous game we're playing.
Still hanging out with DJ Miss Eclectic, G Wade, Danny Parks, and Dr. Umar Johnson. And now we have Todd on the line. Todd.
Sean, you hear me okay?
Yep.
So Sean, Miss Eclectic, G Wade, Umar, and Danny Parker. So I think that's everybody. It's good this is a recorded broadcast because I'm going to say something that everybody's not going to gather in one sweep because it's so lengthy. But, I am I believe in this. Be a healthy appreciator of the accurate assessment of facts through the usage of strict elementary language free from innuendo and sweeping generalizations. If you practice that with the understanding that a fact is something that actually exists, you will guide yourself to and not be suckered into poor content created on the internet or anywhere else. These are things. A healthy appreciation of the accurate assessment of facts makes things easier for people to find truth in and where it may benefit them in a healthy way. Something Umar said earlier in the broadcast was when he was talking about people gaining attention by being content creators. I would have gone a little bit further and said credibility. Not only are these people gaining attention that are creating content, truthful content and disingenuous content, but they're gaining credibility. And often they're able to do so free from any consequences of malicious confusion mongering. So what I would like to see and hear is more appreciation for what I described as what I just described when I opened up, telling you what I had a healthy appreciation for. And then you'll find, and as I find, methods on how to use content on the internet or TV or the radio. A lot of our news broadcasts are heavily focused on entertaining and then give you the news. And life will go better. Life will go better. But you got to stay away from those things at the end that I told you about, innuendo and sweeping generalizations.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Todd. Just because we're on time constraints here, we got to go to the next caller. But before we do that, anybody, DJ Miss Eclectic, G Wade, Danny Parks, and or Dr. Umar Johnson, anybody have a comment or response to that?
It may sound good to me, but I always do my research because, it's one thing to have knowledge, but it's another thing not to understand what you're gathering. So yeah.
Okay.
I like that.
Okay. 404
I would simply add that to an earlier comment that was made that we're not trying to eliminate the conversation. There needs to be dialogue between Black men and Black women. Mm-hmm. The conversation does not need to be shelved, but the conversation needs to be facilitated by responsible people who have a very high emotional IQ. And it needs to be had in an environment where brothers and sisters are solution oriented as opposed to accusatory. So the conversation needs to take place, but it doesn't need to take place in a space that is only interested in creating more controversy.
Okay, 404-726-1380. Let's take this last caller, and we are talking to Henry from Southeast ATL. Henry, what's good?
Okay, good evening to all of y'all, Sean and G Wade and Mr. Parks and Dr. Johnson. We're not familiar with your other guests, but we've seen Dr. Johnson on a lot of the YouTubes and other programs. And we would like to say we have benefited from the information that you have shared. But a couple of questions as it relates to a lot of the programs now they have where they, let's say Fort Benning, they discontinued the name of Fort Benning, and now they are discussing Stone Mountain. And it was a person that said that it might have been a person that was motivated behind changing the name of Fort Benning, but he was saying once he did the research, then he found out the history of Fort Benning and who it was named after. So basically what we're asking now, if a lot of these plays was kept the name that they have, even though it's related to the Confederate, do you think that would bring about more research and more clarity on the status of the mindset that we once was under and that we hopefully would never want to get back under?
Let's let Dr. Umar Johnson answer that really quick. That doesn't have anything to do with tonight's topic, but we'll go ahead and let Dr. Umar answer that. Go ahead, Dr. Umar.
Yeah. What I would say to the good elder, you brought up a topic, and we could definitely speak about it more offline. I'm going to give my number out for the benefit of the audience.
Sure.
If anyone needs to reach me, and that's 215-989-9858. Again, that's 215-989-9858. And Brother Sean, also just wanted to let your audience know that there will be a free event in Atlanta celebrating the 136th solar return of the Honorable Marcus Garvey. That will be on Saturday, August the 19th.
Yes.
Shrine of the Black Madonna from 12 until 6 p.m. It is free, and Dr. Umar will be speaking at 3 p.m.
I would love to see you there, Dr. Umar Johnson, and you always have an invitation to the mental space. Thank you so much, Dr. Umar Johnson, for just taking time out of your busy schedule. And trust me, we all know your schedule is busy. But we'd love to have you back on the mental space real soon. How can people follow you?
Indeed, on Twitter at Dr. Umar Johnson, Instagram at Dr. Umar Johnson, and on Facebook, Dr. Umar Ifatunde.